Welcome to the presentation on the socially and emotionally intelligent workplace. My name is Debbie Thompson, and I want to take you today through a very important topic that is linked to productivity, it's linked to profitability, it's linked to employee engagement, and it's also linked to reducing workplace stress. It's also about changing behavior in the workplace and getting rid of behavior that's holding back individuals, it's holding back teams, and really holding back organizations from accomplishing what they need to accomplish. I'm so pleased to be talking to you right now about building a socially and emotionally intelligent workplace. I've been studying leadership, motivation, and human behavior for many years, including when I was leading teams in the corporate world in Australia. I'm a corporate trainer and speaker and coach. I'm also certified in social and emotional intelligence coaching, and I'm certified through an institution called the Institution of Social and Emotional Intelligence, which is based in Denver in the US. I'm also an accredited trainer and consultant of Extended DISC, which is a behavioral profiling tool, and I'm the founder of Groupability. Now, all of this allows me to help leaders and teams build the kinds of behaviors that are conducive to getting results within the space of a culture where people are willing to learn, willing to grow, and willing to collaborate. So what we do at Groupability is we train and coach corporate and business executives and their teams across Australia. And what our aim is we want to enhance managers' abilities to lift people performance by increasing their ability to lead themselves as well as leading others. And we do that by specializing in training and coaching in social and emotional intelligence and in behavioral styles and in leadership development. So my objectives today for you is to give you an overview of social and emotional intelligence. First of all, I'm on a bit of a mission to increase social and emotional intelligence in workplaces across Australia and decrease the kind of things that happen when there's a lack of social and emotional intelligence in the workplace. Things like, well, it might be bullying, it might be stress, it could just be apathy or low productivity, poor communication, lack of confidence, and so much more. But increasing social and emotional intelligence is not just about having less of the negative events happening in the workplace. It's a lot more than that, and you'll see that over the course of this presentation. So as I said, I want to give you that overview of social and emotional intelligence, what it is, why we should care, the individual and business return on investment of having social and emotional intelligence in our workplaces, and I want to introduce you to the 26 distinct social and emotional intelligence competencies and how this is related to building more social and emotional intelligence in our workplaces. Now, we've got a bit of time right now to cover social and emotional intelligence, and I'll be making sure that at the end of this presentation, I've got more information for you. So there'll be some places where you can access even more about what we're talking about right now. So let's start with what is social and emotional intelligence. And you see it on your screen right now as S+EI, which is social and emotional intelligence. But you may see it in other places as EQ or SEQ. And EQ is emotional quotient. What I want to show you is a working definition that's pulled together from the leading definitions on the concept. So social and emotional intelligence is the ability to be aware of our own emotions and those of others in the moment, and to use that information to manage ourselves and manage our relationships. So the first key is that it's an ability, and it's not the kind of ability that you're born with. So it's not like an ingrained thing, a genetic thing. Social and emotional intelligence is not something that is genetic. So it's not like if you don't have it, it's game over. And it's not just for certain personalities either. It's not only for a people person. Not only people persons can be socially and emotionally intelligent, because it's what we call a learned behavior. It's a set of skills that can be taught and trained within your organization. So the next thing to notice is that It's the ability to be aware. Awareness is fundamental to SE+I, social and emotional intelligence, because you need to be aware of both your own emotions and aware of the emotions of others. And that can be learned. That awareness can be learned. But the socially and emotionally intelligent person is not just aware in hindsight. Now, we often say that hindsight is 20/20. How true is that? But the more you build your social and emotional intelligence, the more you build the awareness, or the ability to have that awareness in the moment when things are actually happening. So just take a moment right now, check in with yourself. What emotion are you feeling right now? And if you named it, what would that emotion be? So that ability, perhaps right now you're not feeling a strong emotion because you're watching a presentation, but that ability to recognize your own emotions in the moment is a real starting point for social and emotional intelligence, and it can be challenging for some people. So when it comes to managing our own emotions and the emotions of others, it's not about saying things are good or bad. So it's not about saying anger is a bad emotion, for example, and joy is a good emotion. It's not about labeling. It's about taking the emotion or the information about how you're feeling right now and knowing how it's impacting you and how it's impacting others. So that awareness helps you manage your emotion and helps you manage your relationships. And those are relationships, when we talk about relationships, we're not just talking about relationships at home with family. We're talking about your relationships with your colleagues, with your clients, with your suppliers, with the people in your workplace. So emotional intelligence became part of mainstream language in business back in around 1995 when Daniel Goleman wrote the book Emotional Intelligence. Now, Goleman didn't invent emotional intelligence. In fact, when he wrote Emotional Intelligence, what he was a science journalist. He has a history in psychology. He studied psychology, but he was a science journalist who simply brought the concept into the mainstream. And business took on emotional intelligence in a big way and started applying it to the workplace. So, there's a lot of people these days who say emotional intelligence is more important than IQ, which is your cognitive intelligence, when it comes to success and leadership. But I don't actually think that's fully correct. IQ is still key. I'm not here to tell you that you can get rid of IQ and you can get rid of technical skills and just focus on social and emotional intelligence, or EQ, or SE+I. IQ is still key. It typically takes an IQ of at least 115 to be able to handle the job of a top executive or someone in a responsible position. But when you're working with a group of people who have at least an IQ of 115, IQ or intellect is no longer what determines who will emerge as a productive employee or an effective leader. For that, how you handle yourself and your relationships, in other words, the social and emotional intelligence skill set, matters more than your IQ. So in that kind of high IQ situation where everybody's got at least a certain level of intellect, the soft skills like discipline, drive, and empathy, those are what mark those who emerge as outstanding. And while IQ is pretty static, your social and emotional intelligence can be learned, so it can be increased. It's not static. It's not something you were born with, remember. It's not something that if you don't have now, you'll never have, which makes it something that we in our organizations can help people with. Now, we know from the Gallup studies that people join organizations, but they leave managers. So the lack of social and emotional intelligence in the layers of management in organizations can undo all the good work that's gone into recruiting and training the right people, who then leave because of the specific person they report to. We also need to remember, though, that while managers with low EQ definitely impact their direct reports, they're not the only potential people with low EQ or low social and emotional intelligence. Sometimes your fellow team members have low social and emotional intelligence, or your colleagues from other departments who you're collaborating with. Their level of social and emotional intelligence is impacting the people they come into contact with, either positively or negatively. So we all know people like this, people who are super brilliant, have a really high IQ, but have very little EQ. So remember, and I'm saying EQ, I'm using that interchangeably with SE+I, which is social and emotional intelligence. I'll say EQ or SE+I. We all know people like this, and they're really, really smart, but they just don't know how to work with people. They are making other people not want to work hard. So while we have some people with those real smarts, they sometimes show up like this in the workplace. They can be a bully or a tyrant. They can be a micromanager. They might be angry or hostile, or they might be emotionally immature. And remember, this is not restricted only to people with a high IQ. It's not only people with high IQs that have the potential of having a low EQ. It actually can be anyone. So bullies and tyrants are no longer just found in the schoolyard. We see them in workplaces every day, and they often have a devastating impact on fellow employees. And you may or may not be aware of this, but the federal government in Australia introduced the Fair Work Amendment Bill 2013 in late March 2013, which includes provisions aimed at preventing workplace bullying, and it enables workers who are bullied at work to apply to the Fair Work Commission for an order to stop the bullying. And it empowers the Fair Work Commission to make any order it sees fit. In a study done in 2012 by the Workplace Bullying Institute, what they discovered is once a person is targeted for bullying, there's a 78% probability that they will lose the job they once loved. So 28% voluntarily quit, 25% are forced out, 25% are terminated, and 11% transfer jobs. So while the punishment rate for bullies does seem to be rising slowly over the years, the studies show that 11% of perpetrators, so 11% of bullies, experience negative consequences. 5% of them are terminated, and 6% are punished somehow. But often those 6% come back and retaliate. That the impunity, that no consequence rate for bullies is still 89%, so only 11% see a consequence of their actions, which is pretty scary actually. Micromanagers have different issues when it comes to social and emotional intelligence. Now, we often think of micromanagers not being able to manage other people, but the reality is they can't manage themselves. They have such a high need for control that they don't trust another person will do the job right, and they cannot manage that sense of control in themselves. And we have the angry and hostile. And there's a little bit of a distinction between angry and hostile. The angry people are the ones who have a little blow up, and then the blow up settles down and they go on with business as usual, assuming that everything's okay now. But what they don't realize is while they've kind of released their anger and they're over it, it's not business as usual for the people around them. They're now all tiptoeing around on eggshells, and they're afraid to speak up because they're afraid another blow up will happen. And hostility is a little bit different. People who are hostile have that kind of low simmering anger all the time. And they kind of have a different impact on the people around them. The hostile ones are the ones who make sarcastic remarks or, just quietly say things so other people can't hear it. And they're cynical, and it's just consistently being cynical often behind the back of the person they're being cynical about. So it's kind of like a consistent passive-aggressive behavior. And then we've just got the plain old emotionally immature. Now, all of these types, these are just 4 examples of people with low social and emotional intelligence. It's by no means a comprehensive list. But even when you think of just these 4 types of people in your workplace, they have an impact whether it's on you, whether it's on your colleagues, they've got an impact on employees. So employees often feel frustrated and blocked or defeated or apathetic. And I'm sure you can imagine the impact on their productivity if these people who are impacted by people with low social and emotional intelligence stay within your organization. If they do decide to stay, you can imagine their productivity is most definitely affected. So what about Australian workers? In a fairly recent survey of Australian workers, the respondents to the survey, more than half, indicated they'd been bullied by their manager, and 32% rated their boss as horrible. That's pretty astonishing stats there. Now, some more research. This is research from Stanford University and from the Center for Creative Leadership. And it was research about the top reasons for executive derailment. And the reasons were poor interpersonal relationships. The very top reason, the most common reason, was being too harshly critical. There was also, in terms of interpersonal relationships, being insensitive or demanding or alienating colleagues. Then there was rigidity, so that's an inability to accept feedback or an inability to listen or learn or change based on that feedback. And then inability to work with a team. So that's in a team environment, being disrespectful, being uncooperative, and when things go well, not sharing information, plans, or credit. So keeping things to themselves, including all the good stuff. But that doesn't mean social and emotional intelligence is about being nice. So I'm telling you about some of the poor cases of social and emotional intelligence. Good social and emotional intelligence isn't about being sweet and being soft and cuddly and making everybody feel good all the time. There's so much more than just feel-good stuff. Social and emotional intelligence competencies includes things like integrity, which is knowing and choosing what's right. It includes building trust and building bonds. But it's also about something called personal power, which is that inner knowing that we can handle what life's throwing at us. So these are all social and emotional intelligence competencies. I want to take you through a few situations or a few studies that have been done that are evidence that things like soft skills around social and emotional intelligence count in a business sense. But before I do that, I just wanted to let you know that places like Yale University in the US are starting to test applicants for social and emotional intelligence. It's part of the application process to the university. And here in Australia, I was speaking to an ophthalmologist recently who was telling me that the university where she graduated from in ophthalmology completely changed their program because they were producing technically excellent eye doctors, I guess you'd call them, ophthalmologists, who were turning out to be really poor practitioners because they didn't have the interpersonal skills to connect with their patients. So those skills, their excellent technical skills they had developed weren't being applied. So the university program was changed to introduce more social and emotional intelligence competencies as these future eye doctors were learning their eye doctoring skills. But let's talk about the Sheraton Hotel. So the Sheraton Hotel did social and emotional intelligence training for their frontline customer-facing staff. Now, the Sheraton Hotel is a pretty big hotel. It's got at least 900 hotels across many countries in the world and 150,000 employees or associates. And when they did this social and emotional intelligence training and coaching in their organization, they had a goal, and their goal was to build a service culture, a client service-based culture. They wanted to increase customer satisfaction. And what they did was they applied these training and coaching programs to particular areas of the hotel so that they could measure the results. And for the areas of the hotel that had undergone, or the countries, the regions that had undergone this training, they saw their market share increase by 24% in the areas where they put the programs in place. 24% increase in market share. Now let me tell you about another study, and this was by Sanofi-Aventis, which is a pharmaceutical company. So it's quite a scientific company, they're pharmaceuticals, and they were quite scientifically rigorous in terms of measuring the results of their social and emotional intelligence training. What they did was they formed a group of 40 sales reps that received training, and they had a group which was what they called the control group. It sounds pretty scientific, doesn't it? A control group that didn't receive the training. And what they saw, the first result they saw was pretty reasonable, right? They saw the group that had been trained in social and emotional intelligence increased their own social and emotional intelligence by 18% compared with the control group. Now, I mentioned social and emotional intelligence is a learned behavior, so that makes sense that they would increase they would increase their own social and emotional intelligence. We would expect that. But what happened, what they didn't expect, was that the trained group outsold the control group by 12%. So they, on average, outsold them by 12%, which equated to $55,200 each per month. Multiply that by the 40 reps. That was a $2.2 million per month increase in sales. So the return on investment that Sanofi-Aventis got was 600%, $6 increased sales for every dollar they invested in training and coaching. That's a pretty good return on investment for training and coaching. And then the third one I want to talk to you about is about PepsiCo and the social and emotional intelligence programs they ran. What they saw was a 10% increase in productivity, and that's pretty significant. I mean, how many of our organizations are looking to increase productivity? Pretty much all of them, and a 10% increase is significant. But even more significant for them was they saw an 87% decrease in turnover, which saved them $4 million, obviously in things like recruitment fees, etc. And so for them, their return on investment for their social and emotional intelligence programs was over 1,000%. 1,000%. So we've just talked about 3 organizations, but what about for the individuals? What we notice for individuals is we know that we don't work at our best when we're emotionally upset or when we're not managing our emotions. We don't perform at our best. When we can perform with high social and emotional intelligence, we see increased performance and achievement. We see an increase in creativity and innovative problem solving. We see better decisions being made. We see more flexibility in thought processes, and we even see improved memory with high social and emotional intelligence when we look at people at an individual level. So why social and emotional intelligence programs in the workplace? I think we've already covered a little bit why, but to summarize it, there's greater productivity, you see greater retention of talent, you see greater employee engagement, also greater client satisfaction, higher profitability, reduced stress and conflict, and even reduced sick days. And I could talk to you as well about the studies around the health benefits of high social and emotional intelligence, which I haven't even gone through. So what's the solution? What actions can organizations take to benefit from increased social and emotional intelligence in the workplace? Well, the first step is to introduce social and emotional intelligence into the workplace culture. So to start building it into your expectations of how people behave in the workplace, bringing it into the lexicon, letting people understand what it is, and start working towards it. The next thing is to assess for social and emotional intelligence, to bring awareness. So to ensure that, they say that things that don't get measured don't improve. So finding a way to measure social and emotional intelligence and bring to awareness where we're doing really well and where we might not be doing really well in social and emotional intelligence is key. And the next step after that is training to teach people about the key competencies. So we've introduced it into the workplace. We are assessing to bring awareness, and then we're training to teach people the key competencies. So we're starting to give them the tools and the language and the capacity to know more and change more about their own social and emotional intelligence. And finally, social and emotional intelligence coaching programs can help change individual behavior, team behavior, and even change organizational culture. So we follow here at Groupability the 4-quadrant model for social and emotional intelligence. And I am at the end of this presentation going to tell you where to get more information about this, so stay tuned for that. This model, this is just a very quick snapshot of the social and emotional intelligent 4-quadrant model. And you'll see at the top left of the model, you'll see self. And then beside that, you'll see other. And so the top left-hand quadrant is self-awareness. And the top right-hand quadrant is other awareness, because awareness is the first step in social and emotional intelligence. It's about being self-aware, aware of the emotions that are coming up for us, and aware of what might be happening for other people or the other person that we're talking about. And then it's about using this awareness and this information, which is a really rich source of information, by the way, if we listen to it, using it to manage ourselves and using it to manage our relationships. So try this on for size. Really what you're doing with social and emotional intelligence is you're just tuning into another source of data. Your emotions and those of others tell you a lot if you're willing to take the time to notice them. They're impacting your behavior whether you notice them or not. So you may as well take in your emotions as key data that will help you, because they're impacting the decisions you make, they're impacting how you react, and they're contributing to your behavior. Now, this 4-quadrant model is based on the work of Daniel Goleman, and it's the preferred model in use in 75% of Fortune 500 companies today. And I like this model because you can look at it and grasp it relatively easy, and it speaks to the social intelligence aspect of social and emotional intelligence as well through that relationship management quadrant on the bottom left, which really is the competencies around leadership, as you're going to see shortly. So I will quickly take you through each of the 4 quadrants, and that first quadrant, that top left-hand quadrant, if you might remember, is self-awareness. Now this is key. This is really foundational stuff. It all starts here. We can't be aware of what might be coming up for others if we aren't even aware of what's coming up for us. And we certainly can't manage ourselves if we don't even know what's coming up for us. So it really begins here. It really primarily begins with emotional self-awareness, accurate self-assessment, and personal power. So emotional self-awareness is really about recognizing your own emotions and their effects. Accurate self-assessment is really about knowing your own strengths and limits. So we can often self-assess, but we're not always all that accurate about it. And personal power is the sense of your own self-worth, your capability. Sometimes we call that self-confidence. So these are the 26 competencies that we measure when we assess for social and emotional intelligence. So those were the first 3 competencies for self-awareness. Next, we have the competencies for self-management. So with that awareness, what do we do? Before I go through that, I want to tell you about, I wonder if you've ever heard of the marshmallow study. So this is a psychological study that gets done and has been done over and over again, and the results are consistent, where 4-year-olds are brought into a room and are shown a marshmallow. And they're told by an adult in the room. The adult says, I need to leave for 10 or 15 minutes, and you can either eat the marshmallow, that's fine, you can eat the marshmallow while I'm away, or you can wait till I come back, and if you haven't eaten it yet, I'll give you another marshmallow. So this is a test of impulse control, which is a self-management competency, and it's a test at a very young age. And when they test kids who don't have the self-control with the marshmallow, what they've done is they've done longitudinal studies which show that the lack of self-control has an impact further down the line, or the existence of self-control, even in a 4-year-old, can be predictive of success in the future. So the 4-year-olds who had self-control did higher on their university entrance exams. By various measures, they were more successful, etc. Now, I'm not telling you this to say that if at 4 years old you couldn't resist a marshmallow, that you're done for. I'm telling you that what we haven't had in the past often is a way to teach self-control, we've not always recognized that it's something that we have some control over ourselves and that we can change it. So the competencies on the self-management quadrant that we measure when we assess for social and emotional intelligence are behavioral self-control, which is what I've just been talking about, integrity, innovation and creativity, initiative and bias for action, achievement drive, realistic optimism. So this is not Pollyanna stuff. This is optimism. This is optimism that is appropriate. We measure resilience, stress management, personal agility. Now, personal agility is being able to, it's adaptability, being able to adapt to change readily and willingly as needed. And finally, in self-management, we have intentionality, which is like behaving deliberately on purpose, not randomly. So those are the competencies we measure for self-management. Now we have the other awareness quadrant, which is awareness of others, or social awareness, we sometimes call it. And there are 3 key competencies we measure for other awareness. The first one is empathy. Now, empathy is getting a lot of airtime in a lot of research around success, around leadership, around customer service, and around being a competency that'll be so important in the future for success within organizations. And empathy really is sensing other people's feelings and perspectives and taking an active interest in their concerns. So when you have empathy, you are able to notice how other people are feeling, and you're able to take on their perspectives. And you can see why that's important in both leadership and in customer service. It's also important in things like sales. Another competency that we measure in other awareness is situational or organizational awareness. So whereas empathy is recognizing the feelings of one other person, situational or organizational awareness is about having the feeling of the vibe within the group. And sometimes, a subset of that is political awareness. So being aware of tendencies of a group and how they'll likely behave or likely be feeling. And the final one is service orientation. Service orientation is about wanting to meet people's needs and wanting to help them. So being able to recognize other people's needs and meet them. The final quadrant, which is the competencies that we tend to consider the competencies of leadership. So as I go through this list, you're going to notice these are things that we often do in leadership development programs. And all of the other 3 quadrants lead to this quadrant. This is the pinnacle quadrant, and this is so much of where coaching often takes place. I don't know if you organize coaching in your organization, but if you look at these competencies, this is where we often say people, as they build more seniority in their organization and they move up the corporate ladder, for example, these are the competencies that they need help developing in order to be truly successful. So communication, interpersonal effectiveness, powerful influencing skills, conflict management, inspirational leadership, catalyzing change, building bonds, teamwork and collaboration, coaching and mentoring others, and building trust. So it's clear, I'm sure to you, that this is the area of leadership. So social and emotional intelligence really is a collection of skills or competencies, and they are learnable. It is about being aware of what's going on within us in the moment. It's about being aware of what might be going on within others and responding with care and consideration. It's about managing ourselves in the moment and managing our relationships with others. Now, when we look at evaluating and assessing the individual's level of social and emotional intelligence through a self-assessment, for example, you'll see all of the competencies I just mentioned in those 4 quadrants are along the bottom of this screen here. And for each of them, there are 5 zones. You can see a scale on the left hand, the vertical axis. There's a scale of 0 to 15, and that crosses 5 zones. So we have cautionary, vulnerable, average, strong, and exceptional. And so with a simple online assessment, we're able to see where they feel they are with each of these competencies, the person who's self-assessing. And by using this quantitative measure and combining it with some other qualitative stuff, then we can get an accurate picture of what's going on for this person. And remember, it's not just about focusing on where they're not doing well. In this particular example, there's nothing in the vulnerable or cautionary range, but there's still, that doesn't mean there isn't work to do here. We also need to remember we can focus on what's already strong. So the strongest competency in this particular one is right near in the middle of the graph, and it's empathy. So this person ranks 14 on empathy. Now that's a strength that someone can use to leverage their success and help them be even more successful. But we do need to also work on things that they need to change. And that's not by getting people to go from an 8 to a 15. That's called a recipe for overwhelm. What we do want to work is help people incrementally increase the social and emotional intelligence competencies that are important for their success at work, that they need to improve, and we need to help them do that on an incremental basis. Because we don't want to create a situation where people think they have to become an absolutely brilliant at something. We just want to help them move up higher on this graph. So what we're looking at here is a set of competencies that are the result of a self-assessment, and sometimes it can be valuable as well to do a 360 assessment where someone's direct reports, their colleagues, their supervisors, and any other stakeholders can help, can also assess them, and we can do a report that has everybody's results. So what I want to do, as I said to you earlier, is give you something further that you can take away and look at. Because really we've just gone with an overview here. And before you start assigning budget to this and we start working together, you can have a look at a sample report and at a validity report around the tool that we use, which, as I mentioned, is through the Institute of Social and Emotional Intelligence. Now, the sample report will show you a list of every competency, and it will also show you an example of behaviors of people who have that competency. So for each of the 26 competencies, it's going to say people who are strong in this competency tend to behave this way. People who aren't strong in this competency tend to behave this way. And it also gives a set of development tips for improving that competency, which can then be built into an employee's development action plan. I've also included a copy of the slides from this presentation so that you can review them and use them in your organization. Or if you'd like me to run a webinar or do a presentation to your team, then feel free to contact me about that as well. So you can go to www.groupability.com.au/SEI-workplace-solutions. And it will ask you to put in an email address so that I know that you're a real person and not someone spamming. And then you'll have access to download these for you and for your organization. Now, I know you're going to have questions, and if you're not already connected with me on LinkedIn, I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. So send me a message on LinkedIn once you've connected with me, and I can answer your initial questions. If it's something that we can organize to get together and have a chat about it, that's fine as well. But I really want to make sure that A culture of social and emotional intelligence can be easily taken into your organization, so I'd love to help you with that. So here's that link again if you didn't get it down before. Go ahead and go and get those reports. I've really got a passion to help you in your organization to increase social and emotional intelligence so that you can increase productivity and engagement and retention, and you can increase profitability and create a workplace where people want to come to work and they're enjoying it there. So this is Debbie Thompson from Groupability. I'd love to talk to you further. Thanks for listening.